The train gave a final groan before stillness fell over the little station. Smoke drifted into the pale sky, dissolving as though reluctant to linger in this harsh stretch of earth. From the wooden steps came a girl, her hand clutched so tightly around a carpet-bag that the knuckles blanched. Clara Belle Whitfield descended as though each plank might give way beneath her. She was not a girl in truth, not anymore, but the world had stripped her down to such fragility that one could mistake her for a creature on the edge of breaking. Her dress was plain, a faded blue, the hem darkened by travel dust. A ribbon once bright had dulled with years of folding and refolding. Yet her eyes, pale and wide, carried the stubborn shimmer of someone who had not entirely surrendered to despair. Names were called in the station yard, wagons loading, horses stomping restless hooves. When the station master lifted his cap and drawled her name aloud, Miss Clara Whitfield, it echoed too sharply. It carried through the waiting faces like an announcement of shame, like a brand placed upon her back. She felt the weight of strangers' eyes on her, the curve of smirks, the flicker of pity. She swallowed hard and dared to look across the platform, seeking him. Jedediah Carter stood like a shadow against the sun, a tall figure, shoulders cut square by years of labor, hat brim drawn low enough that his eyes were a mystery. His beard was dark, peppered faintly by gray, and the lines etched into his jaw spoke of both weather and sorrow. Beside him lingered a small girl, no taller than his knee. She clutched a doll missing one arm, her curls falling loose and unkempt, and she stared at Clara with a gaze too cautious for a child of 6. Clara felt a sting, sharp as wind against raw skin. This was not a welcome. This was an arrangement measured in silence. Jed gave no words, only a nod. The girl pressed closer to him, her small hand clutching the fabric of his trousers. Clara's breath trembled in her chest. She managed a shallow curtsy, though her knees wished to give out, and whispered, "Mr. Carter." He tipped his hat, but did not answer. The silence said enough. When she stepped into the yard, the murmurs began. Women gathered in pairs let their voices rise soft but piercing, a language Clara knew all too well. "Mail order bride," one said with a curl of the lip. "Imagine the desperation." Another added, "Poor man, settling for what the East casts off." The words were meant to be quiet, yet they carried with deliberate cruelty. Clara bent her head, heat flooding her cheeks. She wanted to disappear into her worn shoes. Miss Abigail Crow, the town seamstress, looked her over with the cool disapproval of a woman measuring fabric and finding it lacking. Her eyes lingered on Clara's thin wrists, the dust on her hem, the modest tilt of her hat. Then she clicked her tongue and turned away, as if judgment had been passed and sealed. Sheriff Elias Boone, leaning against a post, tipped his hat when Clara passed. His face betrayed no mockery, no kindness either, only a recognition that the law bore witness to all things, even this. She offered a shy nod in return and wished the ground might open and carry her home, if only she had one left to claim. Jed motioned her toward the wagon, his movements deliberate, as though every gesture cost him effort. Clara followed, her carpet bag pressed to her chest, feeling the eyes of the town pinned to her back, until the wheels rolled over the dusty road and the buildings shrank into the distance. The ride carried little sound but the creak of wood and the steady clip of hooves. Clara kept her gaze lowered, though now and then she stole a glance at the child. Lila, that was the name written in the letters. The girl stared at the doll cradled in her arms, lips pressed tight as if guarding against words. Clara longed to reach across the space, to say something kind, something to soften the distance. Yet she feared the attempt might shatter what little trust existed. The land stretched wide, raw, and unyielding. Fences lined the horizon. Cattle dotted the fields like dark stones. Clara thought of the letters that had brought her here, each one scrawled in a hand both stern and careful. Promises of work, of shelter, of a chance to belong. She remembered the final line that had steadied her resolve. "I do not ask for love, only a woman willing to try." She had clung to those words as a drowning soul clings to driftwood. Yet, sitting beside the silence of this man, she wondered if she had misread them entirely. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk was laying gold across the land. The house stood solid, weather-beaten, its porch sagging but proud, like a sentinel refusing to bow. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and pine, of something faintly sweet that might have been memory. Clara set her carpetbag at the threshold, uncertain where she belonged. Jed guided her toward the kitchen, the floor creaking beneath his boots. At supper, Clara fumbled with the plates, uncertain whether to serve or wait. Jed had set aside, eyes cast downward as though the food demanded his full attention. He ate in silence, each movement precise, mechanical. Lila poked at her beans, sneaking glances at Clara, then quickly looking away. Clara forced a smile that trembled at the corners, hoping to bridge the distance, but the air remained thick with grief that did not belong to her. She noticed the doll on the floor, its missing arm hanging by a thread. Her fingers itched to mend it, but she held back, fearing intrusion. She swallowed her words and folded them inside, where all unspoken things lay heavy. When the plates were cleared, Clara excused herself with a whisper. She carried her bag into the small room set aside for her. The walls were bare, the bed narrow, the windows squarely cut to reveal the last light fading from the fields. She unpacked carefully, laying her meager belongings in the drawer. 2 dresses, a comb with missing teeth, a ribbon pale from use. At the bottom rested the letters, folded soft from rereading. She touched the ink, traced the name Jedediah Carter, and closed her eyes. Alone, the sob rose before she could still it. She pressed her face into the thin pillow and let it come, each tear carrying the ache of journeys past, the years of being unwanted, of drifting from one cold boarding house to the next, of waiting for someone to see her. Yet beneath the grief, a small ember of resolve burned. She whispered to herself, voice raw but steady, "Tomorrow, I will try again." The night grew quiet around her. Outside, the cattle lowed. The wind brushed against the eaves. Inside, the little house held 3 hearts wrapped in silence, none yet willing to break it. And though Clara lay sleepless, she knew the story had only just begun, and something unnamed waited in the distance, patient as dawn. Clara rose before the sun, her body aching from restless sleep, but her spirit unwilling to yield. She lit the stove with trembling fingers, coaxing flame from brittle kindling. The kitchen filled with the smell of coffee, bitter and grounding, and bread she dared to attempt though the dough resisted her hands. She hummed as she worked, softly, a tune without words, one her mother had once crooned while mending hems. The sound startled her at first. How strange to hear music in a house that felt hollow, but she let it linger. When Lila padded into the room, hair tangled from dreams, she paused at the sight of the table set with care. A small loaf sat steaming, the crust uneven yet earnest. Clara poured milk into a cup and slid it toward the girl, without a word. Lila hesitated, then accepted, her tiny fingers curling around the rim. Jed entered not long after, his boots sounding heavy on the floorboards. His eyes flicked to the bread, then to Clara. He said nothing, only sat and ate. Yet when she noticed he took a second slice, warmth flickered in her chest. She spent her hours tending to small things, mending a torn curtain, sweeping dust from corners, patching her own dress by lamplight. She did these acts not to impress but to belong, as if the house itself might someday regard her kindly. Lila watched from doorways, curious but wary. When the child left her doll on the porch, Clara took needle and thread and stitched the dangling arm back into place. She laid it quietly on the girl's pillow. That night, when she passed Lila's door, she heard a soft gasp of delight, followed by the gentle clatter of porcelain buttons as the doll was hugged close. Clara smiled to herself, though no thanks was spoken. Jed noticed these small transformations, though he tried not to reveal it. One morning he found the tools neatly arranged in the shed, the broken latch oiled to swing smooth again. Another day he caught sight of Clara, kneeling by the chicken coop, skirts muddied, coaxing a stubborn hen into laying. She moved with determination, though each task seemed heavier than her slender frame should bear. He studied her from the fence line, his heart tugged by something he did not yet name. Yet outside their home, whispers carried. At church on Sunday, Clara felt the weight of stairs like stones against her back. She wore her plainest dress, washed and pressed, Yet the seamstress, Miss Abigail Crow, looked her over with the same narrowed eyes as before. In the pew behind, two women spoke low enough for their words to pierce. She came by train, no family, no dowry. One hissed, "A bride bought by letter. What sort of mother can that make?" The other tittered softly. Clara fixed her gaze on the hymn book, lips trembling as she sang, each note trembling between faith and shame. After the service, Pastor Reed approached Jed with furrowed brow. "Appearances matter, Carter. Folks watch what example you set." Jed's jaw tightened, but he said little. Clara, standing nearby, wished she might vanish into the ground. When they returned home, silence stretched thicker than usual, each of them carrying the echo of judgment. It was Lila who broke first. That night, the child woke crying, her small voice calling into the darkness for a mother who no longer came. Clara rushed to her side, heart pounding as though summoned by something greater than duty. She knelt by the bed, smoothing curls damp with tears, whispering comforts she barely remembered how to give. Lila clung to her nightdress, breath hitching, eyes shimmering with need. Then, in a voice fragile as paper, she whispered, "Will you be my mama?" The world seemed to still. The walls, the wind outside, even Clara's breath, all paused in reverence of that plea. Her throat tightened, tears pricking without warning. She pulled the child into her arms, holding her as though cradling something holy. "Yes, darling," she murmured, her words catching. "Yes, if you'll have me." Lila nestled against her chest, her small body softening in relief, and for the first time, Clara felt more than a guest within these walls. She felt claimed. Jed stood in the doorway, unseen at first. He had woken to the sound of his daughter's cries, but what he witnessed undid him. Clara bent over Lila, her face alight with a tenderness that lit even the darkest corners of grief. His heart, bound for years in silence, cracked. He stepped forward, his boots soundless, and rested his hand upon Clara's shoulder. She looked up, startled, meeting eyes she had never truly seen until that moment. "Clara," he said, her name spoken like a prayer. It was not grand, not adorned with promises, yet it carried the weight of trust he had long withheld. She held his gaze, searching for judgment, but found none. Only a weary man finally willing to see her, not as a bargain struck, but as flesh and spirit woven into his life. His hand did not leave hers, and though no vows were spoken, the gesture bound them stronger than words could. The days that followed shifted quietly. Jed began to speak more, simple things, asking after her chores, offering advice, even praising her bread when it grew less uneven. He took to leaving small tasks unfinished, as if granting her the chance to make the house her own. Clara noticed, and her heart swelled with the unspoken invitation. Lila followed her about the rooms with newfound ease, tugging at her skirts, asking for stories. Clara told them slowly, each word carefully chosen, tales of rivers she had once seen, of stars that marked travelers' paths. The girl listened as though each syllable mended something broken. Yet the town still whispered, and judgment did not vanish. But within the Carter house, the voices no longer mattered, for Clara had heard the only words that counted, from the lips of a child who asked for love, not as a demand, but as a gift of trust. And Jed, who once thought silence his only refuge, found his heart speaking again through small acts. An extra log on the fire before she woke, a chair mended without her asking, his gaze softening when she caught him watching her. One evening, as dusk painted the horizon in shades of gold and violet, Clara stood at the porch with Lila curled in her arms. Jed stepped beside her, his presence no longer heavy but steady. The wind rustled the grass, and for a moment, the world felt suspended. He glanced at her, then at his daughter nestled close. His hand brushed hers, deliberate and sure. They stood that way until the stars pricked the sky. Three figures bound not by bargain, but by quiet salvation. Perhaps it was not triumph the way others imagined, not the sweep of romance from tales, nor the thunder of applause from neighbors who doubted. It was gentler, humbler. A house no longer hollow, a child no longer lonely, a woman no longer trembling. And as the night wrapped its arms around them, Clara understood that belonging was not granted by signatures or town approval. It was built, one gesture at a time, until the silence itself bloomed with unspoken vows. And if you, listening to this memory, have ever felt yourself unworthy, overlooked, or spoken of in whispers, remember Clara. Remember that even in the harshest lands, the smallest acts of grace can turn strangers into kin. Love need not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes as a child's whisper in the night, asking simply to be held. And sometimes that is enough to change the course of a life forever.